The following webinar was recorded on January 28, 2016, and references features current at that time. Please visit tasktop.com/integrations for a current list of available connectors. So our presenters today are Mara Puisite and Trevor Bruner. Mara is Tasktop's product manager for all integrations teams. So those are the teams that are building the product connectors and maintaining the Tasktop SDK. While at Tasktop, Mara has managed over 15 different connector development processes, from the very start of requirements gathering to field enablement and the deployment of the connectors as well. Trevor is our product manager for Tasktop Sync. His varied background, ranging from financial services, oil and gas, to being a Navy submarine officer, has helped him manage all the responsibilities inherent in building a valuable product. So at Tasktop, one of his main responsibilities is to help customers derive the most value from the capabilities of Tasktop Sync. So without further ado, I will hand things over to Trevor and Mara.
Thank you, Sarah, for that very warm and generous introduction. Yeah, this is Trevor Bruner here, and
hi, I'm Mara Puisite.
Thank you all very much. We greatly appreciate your time, and we're very excited to tell you a bit more about Tasktop. Tasktop Sync, as well as one of the great features, ARM, or Artifact Relationship Management, and really show you how this feature can solve some of your very important business-related problems. So to get started, what is Tasktop Sync? And here at Tasktop, our mission is to connect the world of software delivery. And Tasktop Sync is an integrated service that connects your teams and your tools and flows artifacts and information between heterogeneous departments and tools and systems to help with communication flow, to help you deliver better software. That is our mission. That's our goal. So you can see here that although this is a big slide with lots of color and imagery and whatnot, this is our history. This is what we do. We have a lot of big customers. We are enterprise grade, and we connect a lot of different tools. And I don't want to spend too much time on this slide because in a few months it's going to be outdated. These numbers here, with the exception of the one on the lower right, we expect will be bigger. And so if you're watching this after January 28th of 2016, this slide will be outdated. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. So what do we do? Well, when you're connecting your different tools, different departments, there's a variety of ways that customers and departments can do this. One way is via email. So if I'm a tester in QA and I find a bug in a piece of software, I can email our development team. That's slow, inefficient, error-prone, and doesn't scale. Secondly, we can build point-to-point integrations. You can have custom-made integrations between tools. That's great until John in IT, the person who built this, decides to leave, gets promoted. You decide you want to upgrade one of your tools or change tools. So this may look like a good solution that some people have encountered, but there's a variety of issues that you're going to encounter down the road. The third option is what we provide here, which is a real-time lifecycle bus. It's configurable, we keep things up to date, it connects people, and we understand the challenges that companies are going to have. And so what we do is we take the pain of integration so that you don't have to. So here's just some of the tools that we integrate with. We have a variety of tools in a variety of different spaces. And how do we do this? Well, we have an integration factory. We have a process that Mara is very much involved with, which churns out these new connectors to new endpoints on a quarterly basis. So every 3 months we're putting out new integrations in different areas. And because we have this vast array, we understand the challenges for each of these different types of tools. So what does this mean to you? What this means is that your integrations can be done with configuration, not coding. You don't have to code your integrations. With Tasktop Sync, all it takes is configuring the tool to get the integration that you want. So let's dig a little deeper and say, what is Tasktop Sync for those of you who are not familiar? So you have two tools, maybe two different teams, two different departments. So what we can do is if an artifact is generated in tool 1, say a defect, a story, whatever, it has different fields and different information within it. We can recreate that artifact in another tool with those same fields and that same information. You can then have conversations going back and forth. So conversations and comments can flow from one tool to the other to ensure that people are on the same page of what's going on. So for example, the QA creates a defect in the testing tool. That defect can flow over to the development tool so your developers can see that, know that there's a defect, and can update it and fix it in the code. So what are these artifacts that I'm talking about? Again, those are stories, defects, requirements, a variety of different things that we integrate. But you'll notice on that last slide that all the artifact information was the things inside. It was the summary, the assigned to, the status, the severity, etc. All of that was stuff inside of the artifact. But we know that artifacts are more than just the stuff inside them. There needs to be a context around what that artifact is and what it means so that people on either side can understand what's going on. So it's the relationships that those artifacts have between other things, whether it be folders, parents, child, etc. So as an example, if I have a system with epics and stories and defects and test cases, those are all related to each other. Now, if I just synchronize those artifacts over as they are, without this artifact relationship management, ARM, you would end up getting a hodgepodge of things. You get stories, epics, defects, etc., all thrown together with order or semblance of understanding. But if you have ARM, we can recreate that structure and those relationships. And so these relationships we're talking about, again, parent-child, relates and related to, blocking and blocked by, or validating, as a test case may do. So because of this, you can actually have intelligent conversations on both sides of your development teams. So we keep talking about ARM. So artifact relationship management. What is it? Well, in short, we manage the relationship between your artifacts. So we understand how these artifacts are talking to each other, how they're related, and we can recreate that structure on either side of your integration. So why do you need this? Well, there's a variety of reasons, and Mara's going to go deeper into these here in just one second. But you have traceability, organization, and then quality, or release readiness. And now I'm going to head over to Mara, who's going to talk about each of these in turn.
Thank you, Trevor. So the first big area that we wanted to talk about and explain how you can apply ARM in is traceability. And there's many different ways we can look at traceability. We can talk about traceability. We could talk about traceability matrices, requirement test coverage, dependencies, traces. There's a million different details. Now, one piece to the puzzle is the life cycle of a requirement, meaning where it originates, what it is derived from, what it is refined into, and details like that. And then kind of to extend that, it's the bidirectional traceability to predecessors and to successors. And also, as the last thing is, if you are to reuse your requirements, then we would want to be able to trace them back to the original one and then also trace them down the line. So by using ARM, the trick is for traceability, the trick is to be able to maintain the context between these requirements. So by using ARM, we can actually achieve that. And the example that we're going to look at is we're going to have visual use cases that are enabled by functional requirements and that are constrained by non-functional requirements. So the sample that we're going to look at is between Blueprint and HPLM. For those who are not familiar with Blueprint, it's very extensive business process and use case and test case modeling tool. And for those who are not that familiar with HPLM, it's just merely a requirements management and mostly also a testing space. So the sample we're going to look at is, like I said, let's say you have use cases that are related to each other. You have functional requirements that enable these use cases, and then you have non-functional requirements that constrain the functional requirements. So continuing Trevor's example of no arm and with arm, if you had no arm and you were to synchronize to HPALM, you would get that. Not ideal. Makes no sense to people in HPALM. Now, using ARM, you get the exact same structure if you want to. Now, if I'm a QA engineer in HP and I need to create a test for a non-functional requirement, let's say beyond this picture, then just by looking at a non-functional requirement in the top example, it makes little sense. Maybe I could understand what I have to do, what the test case has to do, but I'm actually risking developing a not finished or absolutely wrong test case, essentially. All right, that's about traceability. Now the next big area that we want to look at is organization. And when I'm saying organization, it's not human organization. This is regarding organization of artifacts within your tools. We're talking about requirements, we're talking about folders, we're talking about user stories, epics, etc. And also, by knowing, because we have expertise in each of these tools, organization is also meant to align the mismatches and the discrepancies between how different tools are structured. So the first type of organization we're going to look at is container organization. So going back to an example in requirements space, companies, a lot of organizations like to organize requirements into folders. And it can be in quite extensive hierarchical order, folders within folders. And what some people want to do is essentially maintain this organization and the order across your tools. That's the key, right? Folders, and in different systems, they can be called packages, containers. There's many different ways you can view a container. They can represent also different things. You can say a folder belongs to organizational unit, a team. Your folder belongs, your folder means a new project, or something like a cycle or release. So each organization can choose their containers to represent different things. So where does ARM come in? No matter what a folder means, being able to maintain the hierarchy, folder to requirement, folder to epic, folder to use case, whatever other artifact hierarchy, it's critical to efficiently manage your work across different tools, not just in one tool. And then what I mentioned on the previous slide, it's not only mirroring these relationships, it's also being able to use ARM to map the differences and structural mismatches between tools. So let's walk through an example. We're going to be using Doors NextGen and HPALM. For those who are not familiar with Doors NextGen, it's a requirements management space, very popular IBM tool. And what we're going to look at in this example is we're going to say that folders in Doors NextGen represent regions. So you have, whenever you have a new region that starts being managed, a new folder is created, as an example. And then with Tasktop Sync, let me back up a second. In HPALM, this is going to be a sample for the structural mismatches that I've been telling you about. On HPALM, let's say a new region is represented by a new project. So if there was a region Africa to come into play, I would create a fourth project in HPALM called Project Africa, if that was it.
So make sure I understand here, Maura. In Doors NextGen, we have one project with multiple folders, but in HPALM, we have multiple projects, each corresponding to a folder in Doors NextGen.
Correct. So this is sort of to convey the message that you're not restricted to doing one-to-one, and you don't have to, we don't have to go to a customer and say, oh, you have to use projects and folders the exact same way across your tools. You get to choose that. That's the benefit of it. And then what's also important is being able to represent the further hierarchy, like I said, not just the base level, but the further hierarchy of either folders or projects within your tools, and be able to represent that in some way on the other side. Right. The next sample we're going to look at is development work organization. And let's say you have multiple teams in the supply chain, and each team is using a different process and possibly also different tools. So the goal here would be to have a thorough visibility for your developers, product managers, BAs, release managers, essentially everybody in your organization. And this example that we're going to walk through is going to convey how stakeholders have certain requirements, and they need to convey them to the development organization. And back to Trevor's first slide, previously, before we could do ARM, this was essentially relying on managing it via emails and spreadsheets and very error-prone approaches like that. So by leveraging ARM, you can allow the teams to choose who does the work and where the breakdown happens. And in our example, we're going to look at epics refined into stories. Another benefit is you don't have to necessarily mirror both sides. So this is going back to what I mentioned about folder to requirement hierarchies. You have the choice to align two potentially different structures and use ARM to align the two. And then also, of course, the last benefit is bidirectional detailed as well as high-level status updates. So you not only get updates on one level of artifacts, you get updates on the high-level artifacts and also very detailed breakdown artifacts. All right, and as an example, we're going to look at two systems, RTC and Jira, and for those who are not familiar with RTC, Rational Team Concert, it's an agile tool, also one of IBM's tools. And we have three teams in our organization. In RTC, we have the team that consists of our BAs, product managers, people who sort of align the work and figure out what's the next upcoming work. And then let's say we have two development teams. One operates in Jira and one operates in RTC. And as a note, I can say the RTC that my BA is working is a different RTC instance that my development team works in. So, as an example, let's say we have two epics in RTC that I, as a product manager, have laid out. And I actually have, since I have two development teams, I want each epic to be done by a different team. So by taking advantage of Tasktop Sync, I can say this epic goes to Jira, this epic goes to RTC. Now the cool thing, by taking advantage of ARM, we can say that my Jira development team is responsible for breaking down epics into lower level stories. Now, by using ARM, we can have that hierarchy being represented back in RTC. So this is going back to what I said, that you can allow your teams to choose and your organization to choose where the work breakdown happens and also the level of detail that you want to see in both sides. And then to continue the example, my Epic 2 and my RTC team, for this team, actually, I do the breaking down. So I write out epics and actually break them down into stories and only then deliver them to RTC for the development teams to work on them. Okay, great. And now to what I said in the last slide as my last point is that you can also choose the level of detail you want to integrate with ARM. So let's say the team in RTC uses subtasks. That's convenient for them, they want to use it, but I don't care about subtasks. I don't want to see them, I don't care what their status is, so I just don't synchronize them over. So for me, as a product manager in RTC, I get to see the two important levels of hierarchy, the epics, the stories, and the status and progress updates for those two. But since I don't care about tasks and about subtasks, I do not have to synchronize them over.
And so to make sure the team using Jira doesn't see Epic too. They only see the work assigned to them. Is that right?
Correct. So this is maybe not so. This does not have that much to do with ARM necessarily, right. But to your point, you have the ability to fully manipulate where things go. So in RTC, I could have some kind of a notion or a flag or a drop-down or some kind of a field where I note which one of my teams is working on this. And based on that field, I could say, yep, push that to JIRA and push that to my other RTC team. And yes, that you do not in no way, you do not have to expose all your information to one or another team. All right. As the last sample of organization, we're going to talk about PMO to development organization. And this is going to be concerned with aligning work between project managers and development, essentially. And the idea is that by leveraging ARM, you can fix discrepancies between PPM and dev tools. Because if you guys are familiar with PPM tools, then everybody knows that they're mostly concerned with tasks and a hierarchy of tasks, where dev and agile tools are more concerned with different types of artifacts and epics and user stories and requirements. There's so many different things. But in PPM tools, generally there's only like tasks, or of course there's like risks and issues and everything, but your work, scheduling, and management happens with tasks. As an example, let's walk through a scenario. Let's say your organization constantly launches new projects in your PPM tool. Each project has a dev team assigned to it, so once a project is launched, you know what team will be working on it. For the dev team, once a new project is launched, it does not mean for them that a new project is launched. For them, it's just another high-level work item. Okay, great. So we've come to a conclusion that a project in PPM tool does not always mean a project in a dev tool. So how do we align those two things? So by leveraging ARM, we can allow projects to dictate high-level artifact creation for dev teams. A couple examples would be features, initiatives, and epics. You can pick whichever you'd like. And then also the added benefit is that we can maintain the hierarchy below the top level. So therefore allowing for, again, more high-level or more detailed status updates. So let's walk through an example. And this use case is actually really cool because we just recently added project support for CA/PPM, and we've already seen a lot of response to this ability to do this use case. So in CA/PPM, like I said, we're going to have two projects, Project Brazil, Project Latvia. And like I mentioned before, in RTC, for our developers, it does not necessarily mean a new agile project. Definitely does not. However, this does mean a new feature in RTC. So we are able to translate a project in CA/PPM into a feature in RTC, essentially. The next step would be breaking this project down into lower level tasks or just scheduling the project. And let's say I have 2 levels of tasks in my Project Brazil, and as a project manager, I break those down in Project Brazil. And in RTC side, I want the developers to be able to see that broken down work in their RTC instance. And this is what we can achieve by using ARM. Now the trick is that in Project Latvia, I might be kicking off the project as a project manager, but my work breakdown happens in RTC. So again, going back to my previous note, you can choose what team is responsible for breakdown and creation of the ARM piece. And let's say in Project Latvia, I have 3 summary tasks created by the people in RTC. And by leveraging ARM, we can represent that back in CA/PPM. And again, the big benefit is being able to see status and progress updates for lower level tasks as well as the project level. So if you look at this particular scenario, then we can say we don't only have progress updates on the summary tasks, but the project itself. All right. All right, and then that was, I briefly went over benefits for traceability and organization, and now I'm going to jump into actually demoing sample ARM between Jama and Jira, and then after I'm done with my demo, we'll pass it back to Trevor, and Trevor is going to go through the last big area for benefits of quality and release readiness. So the demo scenario that we're going to walk through today, we're going to start with Jama and Jira. For those who don't know, Jama is mostly also a requirements space, but it has an agile kick to it as well, allowing you to manage your defects and epics and user stories, so you have a big choice of what artifacts you want to use. And for those who don't know Jira, Jira is a more agile focused tool, but you can also pick whatever artifacts you want. If you do not prefer one of the out-of-the-box ones, you can always create your own. So two very flexible tools. So the scenario that we're going to walk through and see in the demonstration is we're going to have high-level epics in Jama that get broken down into stories and that have a relationship created between them. And then we're going to see that being synchronized over to Jira along with the relationship between them. So this is going back to the organizational benefits that we talked about, where you can manage your development work and make sure that all the hierarchy and links are represented on both sides. And then the next step is going to be, if I'm a developer and I work in Jira, that's my work management tool, and I'm working on certain user stories to achieve certain epics, and working on a user story, I find a defect, then I definitely file it and link it back to the originating user story. And by leveraging ARM, we're able to synchronize that defect over to Jama and be able to link it to the user story. Now, one big thing that I want to mention while we're looking at this slide is the differences between links. If you notice, my user story to defect link names are different. So Jira has a link name called block by. Jama out of the box does not, but it has a derived from. Similarly, I could go and in Jama create a custom link type that actually says block by. But that's the one point that I wanted to draw your attention to, because we have the ability to map different relationship types. So you are not set in stone to only do parent-child or only do block by to block by. You are able to map them, mix and match, so to speak. All right, so now we're going to go and look at the demo. All right, so here we are in Jama, and we're going to be creating a new epic in Jama. I'm going to give it a name. All right, and then once we've saved and closed the epic, we're going to also create a user story. Oh, and here we're just choosing an existing set in Jama where to assign it to. And if you're not too familiar with the UI, then make sure that I'm going to make sure to walk through what's happening so that you would understand the concept. So if I pull up my slide, then this is what we are essentially doing. We created the epic in Jama. We're now creating the user story, and we're going to, as the next step, we're going to create the relationship between them. So like I said, if you're not familiar with the UI, then I'm going to make sure that I'm explaining the concepts as we go as well. So we're creating a user story, and now in the relationships tab, we're going to create the link to the parent epic. All right, yep, and I'm going to associate it. All right. Now if we go into Jira, then let's pull up the slide again. We are going to see this epic and user story be recreated in Jira. And now if we refresh to the on Jira side, you can see the epic and the child user story. Now, if I click into the child user story and I say I'm starting development on this user story, and as that started, I'm also essentially starting progress on the epic. As the work proceeds, I find the mentioned defect and I'm going to file it. Pulling up the slide, this is what we're doing, creating a new defect and then adding a block by relationship type between the two. And now we're going to click into that defect, and we're going to click back into the story and make sure that the relationship is there to the defect. All right, if we come back into JAMA, we can see that the epic has been set into progress. And then if we're going to look at the child user story, we're going to look at the links, and we can see both of the links, upstream item that points to the parent epic, and then the blocking defect link as well. So if we pull up our slide, then what we've seen Sync has done is it has synchronized over the defect from Jira to JAMA and recreated the relationship between the defect and the user story. And we can see the newly created defect right here with a status of new. And now quickly to go back to the status updates that I've been talking about. If I'm a developer and I've fixed the bug, I deem my story to be done and I also deem my epic to be done, then we can come back into JAMA and see all these status updates being communicated back to JAMA. So while that's not necessarily about ARM, that's just being able to see different levels of status updates. And that was my demo for to show a little bit of organization and a little bit of how ARM can be used. And with that, I'll pass back to Trevor so he can walk through the other ARM.
Thank you, Mara. So, since we're talking about ARM, we can't just talk about one ARM. We need two ARMs to make this really useful. So, all of the ARM we've been talking about is when you have artifacts that live on both sides and that relationship is recreated internal to both systems. So you notice that the parent-child relationship on Jira was recreated as a parent-child in JAMA. So what happens when you can't have an artifact that lives on both sides? Now this goes deeply into the quality issue on how ARM can help you with your quality of your software delivery. So, as an example, so if you can't live, artifact doesn't live on both sides, what we allow you to do using something we like to call external ARM, as opposed to what we've been talking about, which is internal ARM. External ARM allows you to link the artifact from the other tool. So, as an example, I have Doors Next Gen, and I have HP ALM. So if I am creating requirements in Doors Next Gen, and I want to make sure that they're tested, well, either I can go log into both tools, or we can use what we external ARM to show this relationship so I don't need to leave Doors Next Gen. So let me walk through what this looks like. I have a requirement in Doors Next Gen, and using Tasktop Sync, that requirement is now recreated over in HP ALM so that the tester, the QA team, can see this requirement and can then create tests associated with this. So now the QA has now created tests associated with this, but I am over in Doors Next Gen and I want to know whether or not all of my requirements have associated tests. Without external ARM, there's no way to know. But what we do is we create a link on that requirement that points to the test in HP ALM. So what this does is I know that tests are written, and I can, and you'll see in the demo here, I'm going to show in a second, because of some special features in the Rational suite of tools, we can actually see information about the tests in HP ALM.
Mm-hmm. So Trevor, I have a question. I want to make sure that you explain this. So I get this idea, and it's all fabulous. Now, what happens if my QA engineer in HPALM deletes one of the test cases and creates 2 new ones?
Fantastic question. So because this relationship needs to be mirrored on both sides, what we will do is, let's say test 1 is deleted. Well, there's no longer a test, so that link on the Doors Next Gen side, we remove it. Okay. So there's nothing to point to, so we remove that link. If you create additional tests, we will add additional links on the Doors Next Gen side to point to those tests. Let's say, taking it a step further, let's say you don't delete a test, but you just remove it from the requirement. So the test still exists, but it's no longer associated with that requirement. So the relationship on the HPALM side has changed and altered. We reflect that on the Doors Next Gen side because we only want the links on the Doors Next Gen artifact to point to tests that are actually linked on the HPALM side. So.
And then my other question would be, before you get to the demo, is this solely done for tests?
No, that's a good question. No, this is not only for tests. You can use this as an example. Instead of using HP, let's assume we used another tool and you wanted requirements broken down into stories, for example. We could then show those stories showing up over here in Doors Next Gen as a link on the Doors Next Gen side. So It's not only related to tests.
Okay, so if I did not want a certain level of detail in Doors Next Gen, but I still wanted a reference to it,
yes,
I could sync the links. Okay.
Absolutely. All right. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to bring up the demo for this. Okay, so here I am in Doors Next Gen. I have a couple of requirements already here, but I'm going to go ahead and add a new requirement. So I'll create a new one. And so you can see here, I mean, it's being created on the Doors Next Gen side. It's a requirement for OSLC linking, the name of it. And I'll save that. And now when I come across and look into the HPALM side, you can see that this requirement for OSLC linking now shows up on HPALM. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to associate a test with it. So I have a demo test that I associate to that requirement within HPALM. When I come back to Doors Next Gen, I'm going to pause this for a second here because what I want to show you is I have that requirement in Doors Next Gen, and you can see here that there's now a validated by link on the requirement in Doors Next Gen that points back to the test in HPALM, and not only that, but it has the same name as the test in HPALM. Now, if I hover over this, because Doors Next Gen has OSLC enabled, we can now hover over this and see information about that test inside of Doors Next Gen. And so for those of you who are not familiar, OSLC is an open standard of linking artifacts between different tools. Tasktop Sync serves as an OSLC provider. So we can surface this rich hoverable information from any of the other tools that we can connect to into our rational suite of tools. So you can see here, you can see the type, the execution status, and description of the test from within Doors Next Gen and see the information about a test that is actually living in HPALM. So that is ARM. That is Artifact Relationship Management. You understand now what Tasktop is, what we do, and one of our great features, which is the ability to recreate relationships on both sides of your integration mappings. So, 2 key takeaways from this webinar. First is that we relieve your integration pain. Integrations are difficult, they're hard. we take that pain on and we do it well. And second, artifact relationship management is how you can solve your organizational traceability and quality needs between your various tools and in your organization. So at that point, we'll now open it up for questions. Thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you, Trevor and Mara. That was wonderful. We had a lot of very excited people and also some questions. So we had both questions and comments. A lot of people were saying it looks too good to be true, too easy, and they want some details on how you set it up. So, for example, are the BAs and the testers and the other people creating the artifacts the ones who set up the relationships, and is it something that you have to set up each time, or is there another way?
It does seem very simple, and we try to make it as simple as possible for the users. And in our organization, we try to have the least amount of impact on the end user, right? So the developer, the tester, the BA, they won't even know that Sync is running. They will not bear any manual burden, if you will, to make ARM work. Now, the way that's set up behind the scenes is, if you think about, I'll give a simple example. To Trevor's first slide, he's synchronizing artifact to artifact, and he maps description to description. That's plain and simple in everybody's mind. We say description goes to description. Now, it happens the exact same way with relationships, where in Java, I say my derived from relationship type maps to blocked by in Jira. So all you have to do physically is say, map one line, derived from to blocked by. Launch the sync and you'll be synchronizing the relationship. So it is quite simple. It's mapped at the same way as any other attribute on an artifact.
And to piggyback onto what Mara said, that's done by the Sync admin.
Correct.
Upon install.
Thank you.
It's not the BA having to map this. It's not the developer or the tester having to do this. It's done at the time of the integration before the teams ever touch the totals.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. We had another question about where the relationships are created as well. So does it matter where the artifacts with their different relationships are created? Does it have to be in one system versus the other? I believe you mentioned, but if you could just drive the point home.
So the only limitation we could ever have is repository based. So if a repository APIs don't allow us to write a certain link, maybe it's a business decision that you don't want to actually be able to write certain things, then we won't be able to write them. However, to your question is, if the type don't match on both sides, you have full freedom to mix and match. One to many, you can say relates to in Jira actually maps to 3 different types in Java. So you have the freedom to choose what relationship types go to what relationship types.
So, any more questions?
Sarah? Yeah. So for those on the webinar who are already using Tasktop Sync, how can they leverage ARM? Is there a certain version number that they need to be on?
We've had ARM in our product for quite some time now. Yeah. So if they, we always recommend people use the latest version of our product. But we've had artifact relationship management in our tool for years now. So
yeah, and the one thing that I can say is there's exceptional. Very few tools that can have some limitations, but generally a good rule of thumb is if you see relationships in your repository, in your Java, Jira, Blueprint, HPLM, RDNG, RTC, all of the systems that we've mentioned today, you should be able to take advantage of ARM already for a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years almost.
And if you want to use this, reach out to your sales rep or your solutions rep here at Tasktop, and they can definitely help you to leverage ARM in your environments.
Cool. And I see that there has been also another question about relationship types. If I have multiple relationship types on one side, examples, parent-child, block by relates to, can I recreate all of those? And the answer is yes. So even if one of your sites have 10 different relationship types, JIRA is rich with relationship types, right? But on the other side of the spectrum, Blueprint only has 3 types. So you could map 3 against 1. So mix and match, like I use that word mix and match, but you could choose which relationships, even if it's multiple ones, go to which one relationship type. So you have full freedom to do that. All right. I see another question about, in one place you mentioned ARM as synchronizing things inside folders, and in other places you mentioned ARM as synchronizing parent-child relationships. Those seem very different. So let me give a quick explanation for that one. So what we are tied to, or what we cater to, is how the specific repository exposes links. As an example, in HP ALM, you have folders, you have requirements, you could have many different artifact types in the requirements space. But behind the scenes, what's actually happening is all of the artifacts in requirements space are requirements, but they just have different types. A requirement of type folder, a requirement of type functional, requirement of type detailed, whatever they may be. So in HP's situation, it's actually the same way to retrieve all of those parent relationships. Either it's folder to requirement or requirement to requirement. Now, to your point, whoever asked that question, there are systems that these 2 relationships differ. And we have ways to work around these discrepancies as well. This goes back to my point that we not only make you mirror the relationships, but we allow you to adjust and match up the structural differences, if you will. I used that term earlier. But yes, to your point, there's certain repositories who expose these relationships differently, but we make sure to work around that, or rather build our tools such that you can work around that.
Great. So we had one kind of question that is the /statement. So the essence of OSLC being to dynamically access artifacts across the different tools without need for synchronization. Is external ARM the approach to analyze cross-tool traceability without synchronization?
Yeah, that's a very good question here. So, yeah, for those of you not familiar, OSLC, Open Standard for Lifecycle Communication, is a standard that we helped develop along with IBM. It does allow for that rich hover piece that you saw earlier, where there's additional information, not just a link, but you can actually see content that was from another tool within the rational tool that you're using. So with that, we like to think of, I think about communication as sort of like having your cell phone. There's, with the smartphones nowadays, it's all about communication. You can call, you can text, you can email all from your phone. Those are a variety of ways to communicate. And with Tasktop Sync, that's what we like to do, is we like to surface the information and allow teams to communicate in the way that suits them best. So the OSLC piece just allows a richer flow of information between tools than simply having a link. And what we've done is opened up that OSLC ecosystem so that anything that we can connect to suddenly is allowed to provide information via an OSLC interface to the IBM tools. So that's the purpose of that.
Okay. So we have another one that says, for large enterprises, how can we build a user profile model so that individual users manage their integrations without having a central support team creating thousands of integrations and managing them? what if we have multiple Jira instances? So I can address this question in a couple ways. So first, multiple Jira instances is no problem. Like if you go back to the sample that I gave where we were integrating RTC with RTC and Jira, you have no issues with connecting to 10 Jira instances, if you will. So you are not limited to one instance per product. And then, so the individual users manage their integrations without having a central support team. So you don't necessarily have to have a central support team. It's not required, but you will need someone who understands both sides of the tools. So Jira and RTC can set the integration up and also manage it on an ongoing basis. So there's it would have to happen within your organization, and you would have to figure out what's the setup for that. But there's no sort of a requirement of just having one and central thing. You could have multiple syncs running across your ecosystem if you want. So what sort of, oh, Sarah, I see a question that says, what sort of triggers for sync are available? Is it always a batch job, or can there be actions set up as a trigger? So again, two answers to this question. What sort of triggers for sync available? Sync runs, sync itself, the polling, if you will, or the querying for changes, I guess that's the right way to say it, Trevor, correct me. Polling for changes runs on an interval. So you can set it to, we have customers who set it up to 5 seconds, 3 seconds. There's customers who set it up to 10 minutes. We don't see a lot of customers going higher than that, but you can if you want to. Batch job versus, so this would answer a question, batch job, if you want to address that.
Yeah, thank you. So the sync, we don't like to think of it running as a batch job. It runs every few seconds. And again, if that's going to be a challenge for your servers, you can slow it down somewhat. But these are near real time. So the videos that you saw us run, you know, we obviously they were edited for clarity and had some graphics popping up. But that's effectively real time. So if you see something change in one system, by the time you switch over and look at it on the other tool, the change will appear there. Mm-hmm. And something that Mara also alluded to, you're talking about different triggers. So you can set this up such that I don't want something to synchronize across unless or until some criteria is met.
Yeah, as a good example is a flag.
Right.
You can say you would have your requirements and your requirements management space, and your business analyst is working on requirements, and then at one point it's like, okay, I'm ready. This is ready to go. This needs to be shipped to development. So all you would have to do is set the flag on the requirements to true, integration ready, whatever you want to call it. Can be out of the box or a custom field, and that would trigger the sync. Or to the same, in the same, kind of on the same topic, you could choose to never synchronize certain things. You could say, whatever this integration includes, whatever artifacts we're including, if this particular field says finance only or HR department only, never include that in this synchronization. So you have the ability to use what we call conditional syncs to make sure that either it works as a trigger or it works as a condition to never synchronize something, or always synchronize something, for that matter.
Well, I think that is all that we have time for today. Thank you again, Trevor and Mara, and thank you, attendees, for joining us. As I said, if you have any questions, you can just reach out to us. You can see up there on the screen. You can go to www.tasktop.com/contact-us, or you can also just email us at info@tasktop.com.